Maybe begin with you tonight, Megan, on this. Are you concerned that these conversations are even taking place? Do you think they really are? Or is he keeping her close because she's the vice president?
I think he's keeping her close because she's the vice president. And of course he's with her. He chose her to run as his running mate, and they successfully beat Donald Trump in 2020. So of course there's a succession plan. He will get reelected, and then she can run, and he will support her in 4 more years. Like, this is not, I don't understand why this is a surprise to anyone. I do think that what people don't see behind the scenes is the vice president's always been around. She's always been part of their administration, my former boss. And so I just think, I think that people are just reading into the tea leaves a little too much here, and I think that people just need to give him space, let him do his interview on Friday, and let the chips fall where they may, and just let him decide what he's going to do. But he's been making it very clear, and she's also been making it very clear that she is supportive of him.
Is this a much ado about nothing? It doesn't feel like that performance is that Shakespearean nothing.
Listen, tomorrow is our 248th birthday.
I see by your outfit.
This is a very serious moment. I'm going to take the president at his word that he's running again. They put out a statement. That's what they've said. I believe him. But I think to answer your question, this is not much ado about nothing. We in the Fourth Estate have a duty to question the fitness of the president after a performance like that. However, we also have a duty to question the fitness of the other candidate running. And I'm concerned, and I've been frankly upset over the last number of days because I feel like it's a pile on to President Biden. It's good to question him, but we're not questioning Donald Trump and his fitness. These Epstein files are something we in the media have got to cover. I know we're busy with other things, talking about naps and things like that, but the reality is Donald Trump has a moral character problem. He's a convicted felon. The Supreme Court has gone rogue. Our Article 3 branch out of control. The Congress has been out of control. And now the executive is in question. We're in a crisis as we head into our 248th birthday tomorrow. And I think this is a very serious moment.
Well, many would look at this not as a pile-on, but as a mountain of concern that if there is a chance, for the reasons you speak about, if the opponent is Donald Trump, as he is going to be, he's the Republican nominee, then one must climb and overcome that mountain to make sure he does not become a president again. Is it piling on?
I mean, I think that people are piling on. I think that, to your point, the criticism is fair. But I think also the president, since Thursday night, has gone out every day and been in front of the press and done an incredible job fighting for the American people and showing the people that he is capable of doing this job. So I think, I understand the criticism. It's totally fair to do that. But also, he needs to show the voters that he is capable of having that job. He doesn't need to show the chattering class that he is capable.
Laura, well, I agree with that. The other guy has to show that he's deserving of the office. And sitting there and hurling names and tweeting ungodly things and just, again, I'm going back to the Epstein files. I'm not going to talk about them on TV because they're distressing. But we have got to take seriously these type of allegations against someone that wants to hold this office. January 6th has happened. Indictments have happened. Convictions have happened. Donald Trump is not morally fit to be president. So we ought to be on that every day, and we ought to be having questions of his campaign staff every day about what is going on with your candidate. And we're not doing that. That's why I feel it's piling on.
Well, walking and chewing gum is possible. You're certainly right. And there are also a number of top Democrats, Sophia, who are calling for a kind of, I guess you would call it a speeded up mini primary and an open convention, perhaps. And I want you both to listen to what they're saying.
I do think we need to have an open democratic process if Joe Biden is not the nominee. And I do think Vice President Harris would be a very, very top contender in that process.
We need to have the kind of competition and open process rather than some backroom deal to get us the best possible candidate.
The process that's already in place to make it a mini primary, and I would support that, absolutely.
Megan, are there risks of having a kind of mini primary? Because some would question that sort of the backroom deal of, okay, I voted for one person, you've got delegates, now hand them to somebody else.
Well, the problem there is that the vice president's name is on those ballots, and so they also voted for her. She also is entitled to the financial fruits of the labor that they've raised all this money together. So I don't actually know what the rules are with the convention, et cetera, but I just think that she has a higher name ID. She's beating him in some of the polls, the early polls that have come out. She has a financial advantage here. And so I'm not sure that doing a split primary or having that kind of conversation is really what the party needs. The party needs to focus on beating Donald Trump, and they need to let the president decide, because right now he is not stepping aside. So this is like all premature conversations and kind of just eating up airtime that we should be focused on how they're going to beat Donald Trump.
Well, I think the politics of a hypothetical become relevant when the voters are mistrustful of the fact that it is really a hypothetical. And that's the investigation of every prudent journalist, to figure out what is really being told and what it means. And I want to play for both of you an ad that's made by a super PAC for Kamala Harris back in 2019. And by the way, according to Politico's Jonathan Martin, it seems to be floating around some Democratic circles now. Listen.
I'm asking you a very direct question, yes or no?
I don't think I'm not remembering.
I do want you to be honest.
I'm not able to be rushed this fast. It makes me nervous.
Kamala Harris exposes Republicans. She makes them nervous and leaves them unable to defend their lies and corruption. She'll do the same to Donald Trump.
Of course, Megan's point, she was on the ballot when they were voting as well for the Biden-Harris ticket. And you have written about this as well, and the idea of her being a force to be reckoned with if she should elevate to that particular role. But as a vice presidential candidate, these discussions are already happening. Remember Nikki Haley saying a vote for Biden is a vote for Kamala Harris as well. What do you make of this sort of thing floating around even now?
I think the vice president's been clear. She is the vice president. She's backing her running mate, Joe Biden. She's been firm and loyal. Look, obviously, I believe what Jim Clyburn said. You cannot go around the first African-American woman vice president and just skip over her if he steps aside. I think she's the person and she's the one.